Good morning, everybody. Welcome to your Saturday Live lesson with me, Rebecca. Thank you all for being here. As you come online or as you watch the replay, just go ahead and say hi in the comments. Let me know you're here, and feel free to interact with questions or comments as we go along this morning. I'll do my best to keep an eye on things as we talk, because I know that this is a very interesting and often puzzling subject for most of you, right? Because for us women in particular, this concept of eat less, move more, calories in must be less than calories out. That is surely logically the fundamental concept of weight loss, at least as it's been taught to us, preached to us from every venue out there over time for most of our lives, if not all of our lives. So surely, since commercials say it, food companies say it, fitness companies say it, the White House says it, the media says it, Oprah says it, all these things must be true. Well, let's talk about the logic of this concept and the science of this concept a little bit this morning to try to clear up why I suspect everybody listening to this lesson has struggled throughout their life to really achieve lasting and sustainable weight loss over time by restricting calories and exercising more, which is the concept of both those things. Eat less, move more is another fancy way to say calories in must be less than calories out. So, first of all, let's talk about what is a calorie. So a calorie is basically just a unit of heat measurement. Put scientifically, it is the approximate amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degrees Celsius. So that's it. Like, a calorie is not really relevant. There's no nutrients in a calorie. Like, a calorie is just a unit of heat measurement. So what are we really talking about when we talk about calories? That is chiefly what we're going to cover this morning. So the concept, I just scrolled a little bit too far down in my notes. The concept of calories has been around pretty much since the 1700s. But in modern society, we really only started talking about calories around the same time that the heart disease epidemic started in U.S. history, which is 40s, 50s, around the time that Eisenhower was president. And it's not coincidental and very important to note that this was the same time in our history that we started to demonize dietary fats as a potential solution to the instance of heart disease that was on the rise in America at that time. I've done another live lesson about how that concept came into being, and you can look in the group and listen to it there. I won't really cover it too much here, although it is relevant. Prior to this point in history, never before in human existence really was the nutritional guidance to decrease fats and increase carbohydrates until big government started to issue health guidance in the time of this heart disease epidemic. And that guidance came from the White House and a combination of other sources, which I also discuss in the other video. Prior to that point in time, it was always our parents and grandparents, ourselves, by human experience, that controlled the nutritional narrative, right? If you ask your grandparents or your great-grandparents, how do I stop getting fat? How do I be more healthy, right? In the 40s, their answer would have been stop snacking and don't eat starchy, sugary foods. Like, from the beginning of human existence, that was the way to avoid becoming fat until about the 50s and 60s, when this heart disease epidemic started going, and all of a sudden nutritional guidance was coming from the White House, the Department of Agriculture, which is who makes the dietary guidelines these days, all of which, of course, is funded by Big Pharma. So just think about that. And if you'll think about what did human beings look like before the 1950s, and certainly before modern times here in the 21st century, what did our ancestors, even as recently as 50 to 100 years ago, look like? They were generally of average size, right? They weren't hugely obese. Diabetes was every now and again, right? Maybe type 1, but that's not lifestyle dependent. But the instances of real obesity, certainly childhood obesity and type 2 diabetes 50 to 100 years ago almost didn't really exist. These are absolutely inventions of or conditions of modern years within the past 50 years or so. So how did we as a society react when the nutritional guidance became eat less dietary fat? And one of the reasons that was the guidance at the time is because fat and protein are both very calorically dense, right? So the government needed something to blame for this rise of heart disease and ultimately, again, for the rise of obesity. And the convenient calorie was what they blamed. So therefore, even though like your body doesn't know what a calorie is, it doesn't make a difference to your body how many calories you make or eat, rather, from a scientific perspective, because a calorie is just a unit of energy, heat energy. So whether that heat energy comes from fats, proteins, or carbs, like how much of a difference does that really make to your body? Well, that's the essence of the question, I think. So the calorie was a convenient thing to blame for this rise in heart disease, obesity, and diabetes because it pacified both sides of the house. The fat is bad side and the sugar is bad side. Well, you can say eat less, and both those camps are going to largely agree with you, right? So when the original guidance and the lasting guidance, unfortunately today, was eat less fat, what they're really saying is eat less calorically dense foods. And what did we do as Americans? Well, we obeyed. Like statistically, the consumption of saturated fat decreased. People did everything that they could to move their bodies more. And the increase of carbohydrates, which are by definition low-fat foods, and also generally not very calorically dense foods, the consumption of that like exponentially increased. So let's take a look at this book. We're going to look at this book. Ooh, there's the camera. It's called The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung. I'm going to show you a couple of graphs and I'm going to read a couple of summaries from his research. The first one is this little graph. So if Americans complied, which we did, statistically we can see in the data that Americans absolutely complied and still continue to comply with the government recommended health guidelines. So if these health guidelines are correct and really calories and calorically dense food, aka fat and protein, are the culprit, then one would expect that as we continue to comply with the eat less, move more concept, that the instances of heart disease, diabetes, and obesity would go down. And sometimes you'll hear me refer to diabetes and obesity as diabesity because those two things kind of go together, right? I think it was Dr. Fung that originally coined that phrase, but I like it, diabesity, because where there's one, there's usually the other. So this is what happened. See the graph? So what that graph is depicting, which you can all see the increase, right? The increase in the instance of diabetes and heart disease directly parallels the guidance to eat less and move more, the guidance to eat less fat and protein and eat more low fat and high carb food. That guidance started over here, oops, right? And continues to this day. And this upward chart, this upward line here on this chart is the instances of modern day diseases, including heart disease, which remains the number one killer of both men and women. And now we also have diabetes. So what happened? Where does this logic of eat less, move more, calories in must be less than calories out in order for health and weight loss to occur? Like where does this break down? Because clearly, as I said in the beginning, I think every one of us listening to this video has had a personal experience with the failure of that concept, right? How many of you have restricted calories, killed yourself in the gym, maybe lost some weight in the beginning, but eventually that plateaued, right? So then you restricted calories some more and you tried to move some more. Maybe you lost a little bit more weight, but again, you plateaued pretty rapidly. And we all know, like, you cannot indefinitely restrict calories. There's a lower limit because you'll die if you just stop eating, right? And similarly, if you stop eating and exponentially increase your movement, you will also die. So there's a lower limit where we just can't do that math anymore. We must give our body calories, which is otherwise known as energy, right? So once you stop restricting calories, whether or not you change your movement, the moment that you add more energy back into your body, the weight is going to come back. Generally speaking, I would be shocked if every single one of us has not had that experience, right? Go ahead and give me a yes or a thumbs up or some kind of comments in the comments if you have personally lived this experience. Calorie restriction, movement more, weight loss, plateau, weight loss, weight gain. Sometimes it takes a few months, sometimes it takes a year, but ultimately every diet I know that I've ever experienced, my end result weight at the end of the diet period was the same, if not higher, as my beginning weight for the most part. Especially if you look at your weight over a period of, say, 5 years. Like, is anyone listening here today that is substantially lower weight now than they were 5 to 10 years ago? Absolutely, I would love to hear that in the comments if you are. And I'm not talking about any kind of weight loss surgery or major health condition that left you with significant weight loss. I mean, for those of you that have tried to do this by dieting and exercise, let me know if you've ever had any success. Who's had success and who hasn't had success? Drop that in the comments. So let's talk about why most of us have not had success with this concept. So there's a few flaws in the theory. The first one is that saying calories in must be less than calories out makes an assumption about the cause of weight gain. So there's two different kinds of causes at play with, well, anything, but particularly in this example, there's like approximate cause, which is what they're saying, calories in, if you eat more than you move, then you're going to gain weight. Okay, that might be true for a little while, but why is that true, right? What's the ultimate cause? Is it really simply that you've increased your calories, or is something else going on? Let's think about it from an example that we can all relate to, your home thermostat. Okay, so your bedroom is too hot. The proximate cause to that is there is more heat going into the room than there is heat leaving the room, right? So how do we address the proximate cause? Well, we can turn on a fan, we can open the windows, we can try to blow all that heat out. And that will work for a little while, but over time, the room will likely still remain too warm because we have not addressed the ultimate underlying cause, which is that the thermostat is set too high. We must turn down the thermostat if we want to have a lasting effect on the heat of our bedroom. Does everybody agree with that concept? Give me some feedback. Say yes, no, I get the thermostat. So that's one reason why calories in versus calories out is a little flawed in its approach, because eating more calories than you expend could be a proximate cause in the short term of weight gain. But as we've experienced, simply removing or reducing the calories you eat does not in the long term ultimately address the cause of weight gain, because the weight comes back and remains despite what we do with our calories. So the second flawed approach or flawed piece of logic in this approach is the assumption that your body reacts to all calories in the same way. Essentially, that a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. Well, that's both true and false, right? Yes, a unit of heat measurement is a unit of heat measurement. That's factual. How our bodies react to that energy coming in, that calorie coming in, is dramatically different based on what is the calorie. I think we could all agree that when we eat a Twinkie, for example, that is going to have a profoundly different effect on our bodies, both functionally, hunger cues wise, sleep, sugar, all of that. A Twinkie is going to have a dramatically different effect. Our body will respond to that Twinkie a lot differently than our body will respond to a bowl of broccoli or 2 chicken breasts, right? Logically, we know the broccoli and the chicken breasts our body's gonna have a much more positive response to those items on the inside than it would a Twinkie. But they'll all have the same amount of calories. So what's really going on there? Well, essentially, the third flawed piece of logic in this theory assumes, and these two are related, assumes that calories in is an independent process from calories out, right? We consume calories in over here, and no matter what those calories are and or how much we consume, that action is not going to affect the calories out over here, because the calories out over here, according to this theory, is really only controlled by our movement, right? That's the concept. Eat less, move more. Fundamentally flawed in both respects, because these two systems, calories in and calories out, are actually intricately related, if not dependent on each other. Meaning, calories in, both the amount and more particularly the kind of calories in what you are eating, not necessarily how much you are eating, is going to have a direct effect on the calories out, because it's not just about movement. Let me put it this way, and then I will give you some examples from Dr. Fung's research. Think about your body as a coal factory. Old example from industrial times, I know, but let's say your body is a coal mill, right? It's constantly producing heat energy by taking in coal. Conceptually, that's very similar to what your body does. So if your body is used to receiving 4,000 pounds of coal every day and putting out whatever energy it is made from the 4,000 pounds of coal coming in every day, that's going to result in a certain energy output, right? So if all of a sudden in your coal factory you get only 2,000 pounds of coal a day, if you were that coal factory worker, would you still then try to make your furnace produce energy based on 4,000 pounds of coal? Or would you require your furnace to produce energy based on the new intake of 2,000 pounds of coal? Let's think about that a little bit more. If you only receive 2,000 pounds of coal, but you expect your furnace to continue producing energy based on 4,000 pounds of coal, eventually what will happen? You will completely run out of energy because you're not getting enough, you're not getting the same level of energy input that you're requiring for the sustained energy output. And this is where the calories in, calories out concept really breaks down. Because first of all, in addition to movement, these are the other ways that your body produces energy out. By producing heat, keeping your body temperature regulated, by making new protein production, new bone production, new muscle production, cognition, your heartbeat, how efficiently and how often your heart beats. Yes, your physical exertion. We require energy for liver and kidney detoxification, for digestion, for breathing, for the proper elimination of any toxins, and also, yes, for fat production. All of those things require energy out, and they are dependent, not independent, but dependent on the energy supply coming in order to consistently produce the same amount of energy out for those basic bodily functions that have nothing to do with movement, right? Because if you take the movement out of all the processes I just read you, all those other processes must still happen for human survival, whether or not you're moving at all. Your body, in every system that it manages all throughout the day and the night, in all your bodily systems, the number one thing that your body wants to do is stay in homeostasis, stay in balance. Just like the coal factory, it wants to produce consistent energy over time. It needs consistent fuel in order to produce consistent energy over time for just basic human functioning, right? So similar to the coal factory, if you give coal to the coal factory, then you're going to get the right kind of energy out. If you give wood to the coal factory, the energy out is going to change because it's not processing what it's designed to use for fuel. So that's where the calorie is a calorie is a calorie kind of breaks down, because coal is not the same thing as wood. Your body does not process it the same way. Fat and protein and carbohydrates, the three macronutrients, those are three different kinds of fuel. Your body does not process, let's say, coal and wood and leaves the same way. It doesn't. It's a different substance. So clearly the energy expenditures inside are going to be different depending on what the fuel source is. So that is why what your calories come from matters significantly in how the energy is released out. I'm sure everybody has heard about the meat sweats, right? I myself have personally experienced this. I know that if I eat a high protein meal within 3 hours of going to bed, I am going to sweat to death for the first half of the night. Let me know who's had this like meat sweat experience, because what's happening there is my coal furnace just got a massive infusion of coal, the right fuel source, and it is really cranked up its energy production just to process and burn the coal. Just the act of eating the correct fuel sources has directly impacted the calories out concept. Regardless, I mean, I'm sleeping, I'm not moving at all, right? So, if you reduce the calories in from whatever source, you will have a causal and direct reduction in the calories out, because your body wants to maintain homeostasis. It has to continue to breathe and detoxify and make new bones and muscles, and your heart has to beat. You have to keep thinking. You have to regulate your body temperature. So how many of you in traditional calorie restriction approaches over time have also, when you're in that dieting mindset, gotten cold more frequently. Had a really difficult time with strength training. Had a really difficult time maintaining your mental focus and thought processes. Had maybe just a really difficult time even getting through the day. All of that is directly related to the calorie restriction concept because your body wants to stay in homeostasis and stay alive. So when you don't have enough coal coming in, your body is going to reduce the attention and energy it gives to the bodily functions that it can. It has no choice because calories in actually has to equal energy out in order for homeostasis to and balance to remain and you to remain alive. So when you restrict the fuel source, your body is going to naturally slow down the energy output. It's going to reduce the attention that it gives to body temperature regulation. It's going to reduce how much muscle mass you store because muscle burns more fuel than fat. So if your body is trying to conserve energy to stay alive because it thinks it's starving from the calorie restriction, clearly muscle mass is going to go down. Mental cognition is going to go down. You're going to feel colder more often than not. If you've not had this personal experience, let me read to you in closing 2 different studies that were done, one on men, one on women. Interestingly, this first study that was done on men was done by Dr. Ancel Keys himself, the champion of the demonization of fat in this country. It just fascinates me that the same man did this study and then still continued to advocate for essentially the high carb, low fat lifestyle. So he took, it's called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, if anybody wants to Google it and read the whole thing yourself. And it was in the mid 40s, right? So before he actually started to do the heart disease research. He took 36 young, healthy, normal men, and for the first 3 months, they were given, at the time, a very normal diet routine of about 3,500 calories a day. Sorry, 3,200 calories a day. That was the standard diet for men at that time. And then that was for 3 months. Over the next 6 months, they went into a semi-starvation phase where they only got 1,570 calories, roughly half, right, of what they were used to eating. This is what happened. The men experienced profound physical and psychological changes. Among the most consistent findings was the constant feeling of cold experienced by the participants. Because what happened was the resting metabolic rate, how much energy your body produces normally, decreased by 40% just with caloric restriction. The measurement of the subject's strength over time showed a 21% decrease. Body temperature dropped to an average of 95.8. Physical endurance dropped by half. Blood pressure dropped. The men became extremely tired and dizzy. They lost their hair and their nails grew brittle. Psychologically, there were equally devastating effects. The men experienced a complete lack of interest in anything other than food. Some of them hoarded like cooking utensils and pots and pans. They dreamed about food. Come on, ladies. How many of us have dieted, like hardcore dieted in our lifetime, and all you can think about is your next meal? You dream about food. I have absolutely had that experience. Tell me in the comments who's had that experience. I really hope I'm not alone. I can't imagine I am. But I think we've all had an experience with similar effects of that as we've tried calorie restriction. Here's another study, this one from more recently, 2006, and this one on women. The Women's Health Initiative Dietary Modification Trial. So there was a control group who just went along eating as they normally did, and then there was a dietary intervention group that were given specific like classes and instructions on how to eat and move. So the dietary intervention was to reduce dietary fat, which was cut by 20%, increase fruit and vegetable intake to 5 servings per day, and grains to 6 servings a day. And they were encouraged to increase exercise. So these women were followed for 7.5 years to see if the doctor recommended diet reduced obesity, heart disease, and cancer as much as expected. According to Dr. Fung, the results were telling. The Eat Less, Move More group started out terrifically, averaging more than 4 pounds of weight loss over the first year. By the second year, the weight started to come back. And by the end of the study, there was no significant difference between the intervention group and the control group, who just went on about however they wanted to eat and move. No significant difference in 7.5 years. Further, in the dietary intervention group, the average waist circumference increased. The average waist to hip ratio, which is how obesity is measured, also increased. So in essence, in the dietary intervention group, the women after 7.5 years ended up fatter than they were when they started, doing all the stuff and things that the White House and the Department of Agriculture and Big Pharma advocate is the way to control diabetes and heart disease. So just think about this logically for yourself, ladies. Do we really want to continue with the concept that has so clearly been flawed in its approach for years? Just think about it. If this approach worked, then companies like Weight Watchers and Nutrisystem and all of that jazz would have long gone out of business because they would have cured the obesity epidemic, right? If that approach worked, why do those companies still exist? Americans are very compliant individuals. We do what we're told from a health management perspective. And yet here we are, still in this loopity-loop struggle, the yo-yo diet, right? So, Rebecca, you might be wondering, if it's not calories, what is the primary controlling factor of weight loss and overall health? Here's my answer. In my opinion, it's your hormones. Specifically, balancing your hormones and controlling your reaction to insulin, which is the fat gaining hormone. The fat storage hormone is insulin. So, how do we do that, Rebecca? How do we effectively manage our overall health and our weight gain or loss by improving our hormonal balance and by ensuring that we can regulate both the release of insulin and our body's reaction to it over time? That, my friends, is a topic for another day. We are out of time for this morning, but I promise, just stay tuned right here in the group and we will talk several more times about how exactly insulin works and how we can help our bodies out getting that sucker in line and ultimately, with a lasting effect, control and improve our actual health and weight loss goals over time in a true and transformational and lasting way, not one that leaves us fatter 7.5 years after our efforts. Okay, that's all we have for today. If you have any questions, feel free to just leave them in the comments or send them to me in an inbox message. If you would like the show notes from today, including the book that I referenced, where to get it and all of that jazz, and any of the studies and all of that, if you've not previously given me your email, you can drop it in the comments or you can send it to me in my inbox and I will get those show notes out to you guys sometime this week. Okay, have a safe and happy Memorial Day weekend, everybody. Enjoy the holiday, and I'll catch you next week. Thank you.